So we're in the second story of the David series, and this is a summary of the end of 1 Samuel 16 and 1 Samuel 17 of when a shepherd boy becomes a shepherd warrior. So we're told this true story in the Bible. Now Samuel the prophet was headed out to Bethlehem, and he was going in order to anoint the next king. When he arrived, the people at the gate were like, "Are you coming in peace?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm just coming to do a sacrifice." He kind of wanted to show up in disguise. And he ended up calling for Jesse to bring his sons and to participate in the sacrifice with him. So Jesse gathered up all of his sons, except for David, who was out in the fields with the sheep. And he went to the prophet to join in the sacrifice. And he was presenting his sons before the prophet Samuel. And when he first saw the first son, he was like, "Ooh, this is probably him. He's very good looking." And he heard God say very clearly, "Do not look at outward appearance, for God looks at the heart." And Jesse ended up presenting one son after the other, and not once did the prophet Samuel hear God say, "He's to be anointed the next king." So when Jesse was done, the prophet said to him, "Do you have another son?" And he said, "Oh, yes, just David. He's my youngest. He's out in the field watching the sheep." And the prophet said, "Bring him in." And so they sent for David, and David showed up, and he was all flushed from the sun, and he was handsome. And right then, the prophet knew that he was the one. And David, as a young boy, was anointed to be the king of Israel in front of his entire family on that day. And in that moment, the Spirit of God rushed in on David. And Scripture tells us that from that point forward, he stayed with him. Now, back in the palace, King Saul, at that same time, the Spirit of God left him. And an evil spirit came and began to torment him, so much so that he was dealing with spiritual oppression. And his men said, "Well, we need to get someone that can come and play music for you so that you can calm down." And one of them remembered that David was a gifted musician. So David was sent for, and that is how David began to serve in the court of King Saul as a musician. But he was also quickly appointed to be one of his armor bearers. Now, when David was out in the fields watching over the sheep, his father sent for him because there was a battle going on between the Philistines and the Israelites. And he wanted to hear about what was going on in the war. And so he had given gifts to David to take and wanted him to go and bring back a token from his brothers to let him know how things were going. Well, when David showed up, there was this giant out in the field just shouting at the nation of Israel, defying the living God of Israel. And David could not bear to witness it. And he was determined that he was going to go fight that giant. Well, King Saul heard about this and had David come to him, and he tried to have David put on his armor. And David's like, "I can't wear this. I've never tested it out before." And so David gathered up his sling and a couple of smooth stones, and he went out to this huge giant that mocked him for being just a boy. And David filled his sling and he flung it, and it hit Goliath, and it knocked him down, and it killed him. David ran up to him. He didn't even have a sword, and he grabbed the sword out of the sheath of Goliath and cut Goliath's head off. That one act made David become famous with the nation of Israel. And it caused King Saul to wonder, who is this shepherd boy? May God honor the telling of his word. It's so important to be in the word, to be with Jesus, so that we can be transformed. Shalom, y'all.